All right, please be seated, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Certification Training Course. And I'd like to mention that our next class, just in advance here, our next class will be on 5/4/22. It'll be on Wednesday, 5/4/22. So we look forward to all of you being here. I'd like to thank everybody that's here in person and also everybody out there online that's watching right now. Keep in mind that you can download the books or pages of the books, whatever you're looking to do to simplify it and to be able to follow along and really get the picture of what's taking place. It's best to, for those of you that are online, it's best to go ahead and sit down and download those pages and be part of the class rather than, walking around doing things to get the most out of it. And if you truly do want to be a teacher of the Peaceful Solution, that's what we need to do. Okay, so we are in the self-control unit, the overhead, please. We're in the self-control unit. There we go. Let's see if we can. Okay. Yep. Okay. So there it is right there for all of you if you want to see it there. And we'll be continuing on page 75. That's where we stopped at on the last class. But before we start there, let's go on back to the lesson plan and take a look at our guide. The Peaceful Solution doesn't leave you stranded. We recommend that you get the teachers unit. So you have the lesson plan in there, and you also have some of the most frequent answers that are given to some of the questions and so forth, so you can study it. And it really does help to have the teacher's manual. So let's go to Lesson Plan 3, page D. And we're going to look at procedure number 7. Now, we read a little bit of procedure number 7 and took care of that earlier, 74, and the missing page. You look at procedure 6 and it ends talking about page 73, and then it skips 74 and continues on pages 75 and 77 in procedure number 7. So number 74, though, it was a very important page, actually, and we did cover that last class. So we'll be continuing on page 75. Now, procedure 7 says, tell students that there are other appropriate ways to deal with anger. And the reason it says other is because we've already talked about some of the appropriate ways to deal with anger in the previous lessons. And so there's other appropriate ways to deal with anger, and we're instructed to read the appropriate ways to deal with anger found on pages 75 through 77. So we're going to do that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit and some of the things you can point out to students. Keep in mind to take notes, and you might want to write some page numbers down too on some of the when we're talking about this and some of the things talked about, and it will help you to have it available for when you teach class. It'll be there at your fingertips, and also to go back and review. So we're going to turn to page 75 and 77, and in doing so we're going to review each point separately and stress that by incorporating these tips as part of their anger management plan, the students are learning to respond to anger in a healthy, effective manner. And so that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and turn to page 75 now. And page 75, we ended at the bottom of the second paragraph, so just a real brief review here on that. If you look up to the top of the page, appropriate ways to deal with anger. Now remember, this is other appropriate ways. We've already talked about some things. So speak in a respectful tone of voice and use respectful words. Speak in as normal a tone of voice as you possibly can. Don't start screaming, yelling, shouting, and raising your voice. That never did help anything. When you start raising your voice, then the other party starts raising their voice, and it's a shouting match. It's arguing. And you really don't even realize how loud you're getting until someone else comes along and says, hey, you guys are kind of loud there, that has occurred. And I mean, it's occurred to me before too, and probably most of us. And getting to the point of like cursing or name calling or something like that, threatening to hurt somebody, a lot of times all those threats anyway are exactly that, just threats. Well, I'm going to do this to you, and a lot of people have gotten in real trouble in making these threats where they were kind of just threatening, and the other person took it serious, and they got hurt. So rather than resort to these ways in dealing with anger, we want to have an opportunity to work it out and take time to explain to people what's going on with you and possibly why you don't agree with what's going on. Remember, anger is a secondary emotion. It's letting you know that you don't agree with what's going on. Okay, and then last class we also talked about using the I language to communicate our feelings rather than the "you make me so mad." It's more I'm feeling angry right now. I'm feeling kind of upset at the way this is going. Can we talk about this later? I'm feeling like you're not really listening to what I'm saying, or I'm not explaining it properly, and I think we ought to take a break and get together later to talk about this, something along those lines. So the I language, if you look a little ways down that paragraph, the I language opens the door to finding the peaceful solution. The you language, on the other hand, includes statements like "you make me so mad" and "look what you did." Well, they're verbal attacks. They're casting blame on the other person. And nobody likes to be at blame. No one wants to be blamed for something. No one wants to be at fault for something that took place that's not great, So when these things are taking place, these verbal attacks and casting the blame, they cause the other person to react defensively and the situation to escalate and into a much more antagonizing thing. Using the I statement shows that you take responsibility for your feelings and desire to work out the problem peacefully. And that's what we should be wanting to do. We should be wanting to work out every conflict and every problem in our lives in a peaceful manner. We need to get war and hatred and violence out of us, because it's not beneficial. I mean, look around us today and look at the blame that's being placed on one nation from another nation and from that nation to the one that blamed them. And it starts out as an arguing match and starts out as some sanctions and some things being done, and then it ends up in people being killed. Families torn apart and destroyed, and property destroyed. It's not the right way to go. So you should be able to look around and see that that's not anything that you want a part of, All right, well, in the next area there, the next bullet point or arrow, behave in a peaceful way. So peaceful behavior means not posing any physical threat to anyone. In addition to keeping your hands and feet to yourself, peaceful behavior also includes not throwing, slamming, or kicking objects. Like someone would get mad and throw the ball down and say, "Well, I'm going home then," playing ball or something, and or kicking it where they have to go off, trying to get it. I've seen people throw phones on the floor and stomp on them. I've seen people throw models, like a model car or a model ship or something like that they spent a lot of time on, and then they got mad and they didn't control their anger, and in a fit of rage they destroy it. Then they look at it later on and say, I built that when I was 15 years old. I've had it for 30 years. Why did I do that? It's just some of the things that people do. They get out of hand. They put their fist through a wall or break a window, and then they have to go and replace the window. What was the benefit of it all? So when violent behavior is practiced in front of others, and if you can look back in your life and see when you ever saw that taking place where someone was being violent, whether it be the throwing or kicking or cursing and all these things taking place, but what about someone violently attacking you verbally? You know, a violent verbal attack with all the tone of voice and the disgusting look on the face and you know, the blood pressure up and the heart beating fast and the red face and clenched hands and everything. You know, think back on that and how it looked at the time. You know, it might have been a situation with you where you were like, you could have been scared, you could have been thinking, this guy's crazy, man, I'm fixing to pop him or something, you know. Or it could have been where somebody else was getting this done to them and you were nearby seeing it take place. And think about how foolish it all looked, you know. Think about how foolish it was to see something like that taking place around you. And then if you were involved in it, of course, your emotions are really flowing and all, and we can let it get out of hand if we don't carefully practice self-control. So it causes fear, anxiety, and tensions. And if our behavior causes fear and anxiety in others, which, you know, I'm hoping it never does, the situation can quickly become hostile. Over on page 76, violent behavior is unhealthy. It prolongs your anger and can provoke an angry response from others. Think about it. It is unhealthy, but it also prolongs the anger. If you're in a fit of rage and throwing things and kicking and punching the wall and all, it's not slowing down. It's progressing. It's only getting worse. So it does prolong it and can provoke an angry response from others. Peaceful behavior, on the other hand, also means being willing to compromise. Now, this is a big deal, being willing to compromise. Now, we never want to compromise. In fact, it says at the bottom of the paragraph, we don't want to compromise into doing something wrong. Now, compromising is like I'm painting a room, and my little brother wants a green room, and I want a blue room, so we have to compromise a little bit on the paint. It's got to be one or the other, or possibly paint, you know, one side blue, one side green. You know, a little bit of compromise there on things like that, or compromise to the peaceful side. You know, maybe the person that's a little bit angry and not controlling himself very well would be willing, because of your great behavior, would be willing to have more peaceful behavior also. So the peaceful behavior also means being willing to compromise if you can, and to compromise is to settle differences by making concessions, you know, giving in a little bit. Each side agrees to a certain amount of give and take. This means considering the needs of others. And this is the thing, considering the needs of others. You've got to be able to do that. Otherwise, why would you want to concede? If you can't consider the needs of others, why would you want to concede? Why would you want to work it out? You would just be wanting to do exactly what you wanted to do, and there is no compromise, and that's the way it is, you know. So we have to be willing to consider others. When you are willing to compromise, you will consider that there might be more than one right choice also. It takes self-control to agree with someone else's right choice in order to keep peace and avoid conflicts. And keep in mind, you should never compromise if someone is asking you to make an immoral choice. Now, on the next little section there, it says use your positive character traits. The positive traits of humility, compassion, being humble. You know, being compassionate and having humility can help you appropriately deal with anger, because you would be considering the other person for sure. Humble people do not feel that they need to win every argument. And that's a big deal, because, you know, people want to win arguments. You know, they want to be right. Someone who has compassion and empathy, and these are positive character traits. Not all positive character traits are listed in the book. We can go there and take a look, too. I do want to do that on page 224. If in your self-control book you turn to page 224, what we can see is a list of some positive character traits. It's taking a look at that. The positive side of character. And it says your character is made up of many different qualities. And these are some of the things that you have to be able to do what we're talking about doing. You know, if we're going to practice self-control, if we're going to consider others, if we're going to behave peacefully, you know, you've got to have these traits going on in your life. You know, you might not have them perfected, but at least you're working on it. If you're not working on having some of these traits in your life, then you can't just, you know, magically make everything appear. You know, you don't automatically just turn into a guy that considers others' needs and someone who's humble and willing to compromise, rightfully compromise, you know, not something like it said before, immorally or anything. But you've got to have these. Being educated. Look at these positive character traits. Being educated, getting all the facts and making sure they're correct before making a decision, not jumping to a conclusion. Just because someone told you someone did something and I'm going to go get him right now, I'm so mad, you know. Well, you don't have to go that route. Being respectful. You know, no matter what, even a supervisor or a business owner, it doesn't give you a right to be disrespectful to your employees. You want to be respectful, and to the employee that's disgruntled, it doesn't give you a right to be disrespectful towards your employer or supervisor or family member or son or daughter or what have you. If you value others as important as yourself and allow that to show through your actions and attitudes, wow, that's pretty strong. Allowing that to show through your actions and attitudes? Well, how do you do that? Okay, well, this is an example of a classroom situation there. You could read for yourself. We're not going to read everything on here, but I do want to read some of these traits. Being patient, demonstrating self-control, and remaining calm through setbacks. You know, patience is a very great thing to have, and to be patient, you need everything else that goes along with this. To be respectful, you need to be patient. To be honest and trustworthy, you know, being fair, sincere, straightforward, and then being humble. On the next page, 225, not proud or arrogant. Being thankful, to be conscious of the benefits that you've received, and that you are learning how to control yourself where others might not be. Forgiving. How could you possibly be forgiving to somebody, to refrain from holding on to anger and resentment towards someone who's wronged you or that you think has wronged you? How could you be forgiving if you're not trying to be respectful and patient, and you don't have all the facts, and you're not thankful for your own life and what you have? How could you be forgiving to somebody? Being steadfast and persistent, and being determined not to give up on what you set forth to do. And then, you know, of course, self-control, which is what we're on right now. It's not yielding to the impulsive thoughts and actions. It's not yielding to doing something that you know is wrong. It's setting your mind in advance. That's part of it. And practicing self-control is setting your mind in advance and having a plan on how you're going to do things. And part of it is, like we talk about just about every time, remembering that there's curveballs and pitfalls and so forth coming your way. With all of this, as you're progressing, you've got to keep it all in mind. So, remembering your positive character traits and using those. Someone who has compassion and empathy, we're back on page 76, for the feelings of others will not intentionally harm others. The important character trait of forgiveness can also help you handle your anger appropriately, and it's impossible to remain angry with someone that you've forgiven. Now think about it for a minute. If you've ever been in one of those situations where you're getting a little bit out of control and you know, you get in a bit of an argument, and maybe it might be someone that you know very well and everything, and have you ever had it where all of a sudden it just kind of it stops and you look at each other and you're like, what are we doing? Why is this taking place, you know? And then you both want to forgive each other and proceed to behaving properly and looking for the peaceful solution to this, you know. Well, the very process of forgiveness requires that you let go of any hurt feelings that someone might have caused you. That's a big deal, letting go of hurt feelings. And again, to let go of hurt feelings, you really have to be working on having all those positive character traits in your life. You know, you got to be working on showing, going out of your way to show respect to that party that might have done something that hurt you. Forgiving others is not the easiest thing to do, but the flip side is to bear a grudge and hold on to resentment. We don't want to do that. In the long run, resentment will cause you mental, emotional, and physical stress. You know, you ever seen somebody that's very bitter in life? You know, they never smile. They're always sick and just you know, something always going on in their life that it never does seem to work for them. You know, that it's like every time you turn around, they're telling you, well, now this is what occurred to me today, and they're always having these things going on with them. Not to say that we all don't have things take place sometimes that we'd rather not take place, you know, but it seems to attract to people who have bitterness and resentment in their lives, who can't seem to find anything positive about what's going on around them during the day, who aren't thankful for what they have. You know, these are people that you got to watch out for, because their life, they're dying at a young age. You know, I'm sorry. Will you please forgive me? These are powerful tools to diffuse anger. Even when what you say is right, be willing to compromise and humble yourself, accepting that the other person might be right also. And even if you're wrong, you know, to diffuse the situation, you can look at the person or you know, bow your head a little bit and say, you know, I'm sorry for this taking place. It's amazing what a soft voice will do instead of, you know, arguing back, fighting back, retaliating verbally, you know. Notice on page 76, the little section there that has the skull and bones. Holding on to resentment is like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die. So think about how silly that is. You know, you're so mad and upset, and you hold on to it, grudges for years and years and years, and bitterness in your life, and you can't really ever have any true joy and thankfulness. And the other person that you have this resentment against, they're off living their life and having a great time, you know, and they don't even know you're mad at them probably, you know. and so think about that and how foolish it is to ruin your life by holding on to resentment, holding on to grudges. Man, be joyful. Be thankful for what you have and determine in your mind to be joyful about things, and you won't go that route. You'll be wanting to get rid of that resentment. If something occurs and it seems like you might be holding on to a little something, man, get rid of it right away. Enjoy your life. All right, so if possible, walk away and take time out to cool down. You might not always be in a situation where you can just walk away if you're angry, and here's an example. But in some cases, walking away is disrespectful. For example, if your parent or teacher has said or done something that you choose to be angry about, notice that you choose to be angry about, walking away while they're speaking to you is a huge mistake. Now, this is if your parent, teacher, supervisor, boss of any type, you know, it's a huge mistake to do that. This is where having self-control and evaluating your options, remember about evaluating your options, stop and evaluate what you're feeling, what's going on, you know, stop and think. You're thinking about these things. You're thinking about, you know, what is this that's going on with me? Why am I so fired up about this thing? What can I do to not feel this way? You want to stop and think and consider the options and proceed with the right choice. Now, that's an easy thing to say, And it's kind of neat with the STOP acronym that the Peaceful Solution has, you know. Stop, think, options, proceed. It's easy to say, but it's not so easy to really put to work in your life. You really have to work at it. And that evaluating, you know, that's a big deal. Evaluating what you're thinking and considering, is there another way to do this? Could I be thinking about cool thoughts? I'm so mad at him. And the more you repeat that, I'm so mad at him, I'm gonna, you know, why did he do that to me? If you keep piling that on, it only makes it worse. Stop and think about, you know, those thoughts and say, you know what? He might be having a bad day. Or, you know what? I might be looking at this just a little bit too severe. You know what? Is this really going to mean anything 10 years from now? 20 years from now? Or when I'm laying in the grave, is this really going to matter? You know, it really doesn't. These little things that we go through sometimes that seem big aren't so big. They're things that will pass. The STOP acronym, stopping and evaluating these thoughts and everything before it turns into actions, is the best thing that you can do. Yep, in the grand scheme of things, that one little thing is not going to make any kind of difference. That's what we need to keep in mind. So when you've got self-control, you'll be able to recognize that the option to walk away at that time is not wise, you know, when dealing with a supervisor, parent, boss, you know, etc., teacher. Now, there will be other situations at the top of 77 where separating yourself in order to calm down would be appropriate. However, it might not be easy. Walking away from someone who's deliberately provoking you is one of the toughest things that you're ever going to do. I mean, think about it. It's tough to do. Even for someone who's sitting there and the school bully is twice as large as him, and he knows something bad is fixing to occur, but with all the people around and everything, and the peer pressure and the influences from what they've seen on TV and everything working at them, you know, they might make the wrong choice and decide to stand there and stand toe-to-toe with that person. It might be better to try to, you know, get away from the situation and deal with it later. Many people have been hurt that way by the things that have been said, like the parent that tells them, okay, when you're at school, if you ever get into a fight, if you get whipped when you get home, you're getting whipped too. Or if you don't stand up to the bully, I'm going to whip you when you get home. You know, people in this room, I've heard it come from some mouths of some of you sitting right here in this room today. So these are big things when you're trying to make a proper decision. And that's why, you know, guarding the mind too. That's why guarding the influences, you know, being aware of the influences that are entering your mind and your heart and your entire body. Be very aware of those things, because all those things work together to help or hinder you from making a proper choice in a tough situation. So walking away from someone who's deliberately provoking you is one of the toughest things you'll do. Developing positive character and becoming a person of integrity who makes excellent choices means avoiding conflicts that could get out of hand because of uncontrolled anger. Now notice the avoiding conflicts. Developing the positive character and becoming a person of integrity who makes excellent choices means avoiding conflicts. So avoiding conflicts is an excellent choice that could be done by a person of character. And this is one thing that we talked about a lot in some of the prisons that the teachers of the Peaceful Solution have been to, is avoiding those conflicts and being aware in advance. You know, because of your behavior and because people look at you and know that you're a person of character, a lot of times that will diffuse a situation before it ever begins. You know, they might not even know how to deal with you. Somebody who is the king of the game, you know, a real player, you know, someone who seems to be able to get over on anybody. You know, all he's dealt with in his life is people that don't have positive character. So he's very very great at dealing with people that don't have positive character, right? And can get over on them easily. But that king of the game, when it comes to dealing with you, the person that has great positive character, it changes things. It kind of zaps his mind a little bit because he doesn't know what to do. When he's yelling at you and cursing at you and expecting the same thing to come, you being quiet, and this isn't just in prison, this is anywhere, but you being calm and collective and quiet, he doesn't know what to do. You know, it's totally different than what he would expect. So he really doesn't have the game strategy for that. And so developing the positive character and becoming that person of integrity, making excellent choices, means avoiding conflicts, and you can avoid them in advance. But avoiding the conflicts that could get out of hand because of uncontrolled anger. You also avoid bad situations of any type, because if you're really thinking about what you're doing and not just jumping out there, it's kind of like hearing about on the news people that are going down the road and they see someone, a woman over here on the side of the road that's got the hood up on the car, or she's got the jack and everything out, looking like she doesn't know what to do, changing the tire, and you're going to pull over there and be the hero for the day and change that tire for her or what have you, and you get there and then some guy jumps out from behind the car with a gun. Well, you could have avoided that situation by handling it differently. It's possible you could have pulled over down the road a little bit and called the police or called the local highway people that ride around, to fix flats and stuff like that. So, but what I'm saying is, though, by having a plan in advance, having your mindset and knowing what positive character is, and having developed that, you can stay out of a lot of trouble all the way around. Another way in which you can diffuse the anger, though, getting back on the anger, is to make a timeout agreement ahead of time. If you're a person who attacks when angry, then you can create an anger management plan with a trusted adult or counselor, or you have permission to take a time out when you need to. So when the opportunity presents itself, take that time out. Go to your room, some other quiet place, instead of focusing on the negative thoughts, like how unfair life can be. Take a little mini mind vacation. For those of you that were here at the last class, you remember the picture there showing the water, beach side or lake side, a little mind vacation. And of course, from previous classes where it was described how you can change a lot of how you're thinking by your physical aspect also. If you're hot and just got off work and you had a rough day, you're going to be more susceptible to making a wrong choice probably. Whereas if you've gotten home, taken a shower, changed clothes, eaten something, you're kind of kicked back a minute, and reflecting on the day, and you can make right choices much easier because of your physical and your mental frame of mind, your physical state and mental frame of mind. So think of some quiet, peaceful place you've been, or create one in your mind, and concentrate and focus your thoughts on that spot, that vacation spot. Once you're calm and have sorted through your emotions, go back and deal with the problem effectively, calmly and peacefully. During that time, you might even call somebody to get some advice. Be willing to compromise if it's appropriate to do so, and there's going to be more on how to communicate your needs even in the next chapter. That's a big thing, is being able to communicate, and we're getting there. Talk to a parent, guardian, or counselor about your plan to control your anger. So talk to someone that you trust. Don't be embarrassed about seeking help from others. If you can't control your anger, you need to seek help. You need to get help. It's going to get you in trouble. It's going to ruin relationships you could have had. It's going to ruin job opportunities you could have had. You might even end up in jail. So if you have uncontrolled anger, you need to seek help and formulate an anger management plan. That outlines ways you can control your anger. For example, your parents, friends, whatever, see you're getting frustrated, they can remind you to take a time out or count to 20 before continuing the conversation. you're out of control and your mouth is going 100 miles an hour, you can stop for a little bit, count, take a deep breath, all these things, drink a glass of water, do something to slow things down. There's countless ways that you can utilize the help and concern of those who care about you. You might be surprised at how helpful your parents or guardians can be when they know that you need their help. So when you're doing this, the thing that we need to keep in mind is that you have to want to do it. You have to want to do it. No one can force you to do it. And if you don't want to do it, you're not going to. If you're in that comfortable space of your uncontrolled anger that you've been in many, many times in the past, and you feel very comfortable with it, and you don't want to let go, then you're probably not going to. It's an uncomfortable thing, change. But once you do it, and once you're able to stop and look at the situation, it's like the handcuffs are off. You've been let free. It really does. That change in your life is an awesome thing. Now, getting these things over to the student, with the Peaceful Solution, we have some videos, we have some recordings, we have some music and so forth that you can get to. Due to the lack of feasible time to actually play those things, we're not going to be doing it in this class. But those of you that have the teacher's manual and are striving to be teachers of the Peaceful Solution, look into it and see what you can get. It can help you and it can help your students too. The examples, by seeing some examples of these things taking place. So notice in the box at the bottom of the page on 77, it says, strive to be humble, apologetic, and willing to seek a compromise. In other words, find the peaceful solution. And willing to seek a compromise, we've been brought up all our life not willing to seek a compromise in most cases. We've been brought up all our life wanting to be right. We've been brought up all our life not wanting to accept any blame and not even wanting to be blamed. Think of the times everything was a conflict. Mom, he got a bigger piece of pie than me, or Mom, he won't get on his side of the car, or whatever. You can think of many different things where conflict prevailed, and usually it wasn't handled properly. We might have been told as children or young adults or whatever that we needed to do something, but we weren't shown how to do something, shown steps on how to correct our horrible behavior. The other thing we need to keep in mind about what we just went through in all this, not only the last couple pages, but prior to that, is that there's a ripple effect to everything that we do, whether it be positive or negative. And I did want to visit the character unit for just a moment on that ripple effect, because this isn't just about us handling our behavior. If you have your character unit, the ripple effect actually starts on chapter 5. It's the ripple effect, character, society, and the world. But it starts on page 105. There's a note to the teacher and so forth too. But the ripple effect, I just want to read a little bit of this. Our character dictates our behavior, and this is what we're talking about, having peaceful behavior here, and our actions. It is the foundation, and this is the thing to remember, the foundation of which we interact with others. So if we've built up that foundation all our life with negative character and handling things in a negative way, fighting, blaming, warring, calling names, and so forth, that's the foundation that's been built, and that's the foundation our house or our whole persona and our whole being is built upon. Or if we've started out in life and we've built a foundation with the help of many others that have been through things that could help us, built a foundation that's positive character. positive emotions, positive thoughts, everything that we could possibly do that's positive, then that's going to show within us. That foundation that's built within us is going to show in our house, in our persona, in everything that we do. So our character dictates our behavior and our actions, and it's the foundation by which we interact with others. And this is what we're talking about doing, interacting with others. There are very few activities that we do on a daily basis in which we are not directly interacting with someone in some way, somehow. I mean, can you recall a day when you didn't see or speak to somebody, where you were just totally, you saw no one, you would have to be locked away in a room somewhere, and then that you didn't speak to someone? Well, you'd probably have to throw your phone away or your computer away or something like that. So we interact with people. So it's not just about us. That by the way, that's a great chapter that you could go back and see how our actions affect others and even affect us even in the future when we don't even know what's taking place. It could have such a long-lasting effect on our lives and through our offspring. It's amazing. Let's go ahead and turn over to page 78. And what we want to do is understand the main point. We're not going to be doing the role-playing tonight, but it is something that you could do if you're in a little bit smaller situation, a small classroom, a family event, a family teaching event with where you could get everyone away from the TV and actually study the peaceful solution. These things can be done, and they're very effective. But let's look at the very first scenario, and let's be thinking about this in our head as we're reading this. While you're walking down the hallway, Benny trips you. You fall and your books sprawl all over the floor. Okay, what's your first thoughts there? Think about that for a minute. How would you like that? Everyone's watching, Has it ever occurred to you? Can you think back on a time when something occurred in the hallway at school which was just like this, where you were tripped or something was done to you that was very embarrassing and others saw it? Well, so what we need to do is we need to stop and identify that primary emotion first of all. Were we embarrassed, hurt, shocked, frustrated, whatever it might be? And then we can kind of know how to start dealing with that depending upon what stages we're at in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. But you've got to identify what it is you're feeling. What is that emotion you're feeling? And, of course, what consequences could result from handling the situation inappropriately? Of course, a fight, getting suspended if you're in school, getting fired from a job, somebody getting an eye knocked out or getting cut and bleeding to death, or in many times, I know in the town I'm from, more than once it's been known that somebody got in a fight at a bar and got hit, fell backwards, and the head hit the concrete and they died there on the spot, not thinking that was going to be their last day of life. I'm sure they would have done things differently if they would have known that was going to be the outcome. So we do want to think about the possible outcomes of our actions also. It might seem that you can't do all that in that short period of time. Here you are laying on the floor, the books are all around, people are laughing and everything, and you've got to stop and think about all these things before you take action. Well, you think about it quick. When you're practicing the Peaceful Solution, these things come to you much quicker than they would if you weren't practicing the Peaceful Solution. And that's the key to this thing, is practicing it. And look at number C, or letter C. What cool thoughts would you think to handle the situation appropriately? And so this right here is the thing, controlling those thoughts. So something triggers it, and then you got thoughts which lead to feelings, and feelings which lead to actions. So we want to get hold of those thoughts, and instead of feeding fuel to the fire and saying I'm going to get him and just wait till I get up, or having all these things, why not think? He might not have even done it. It might have been an accident. Give him the benefit of the doubt. Or, I'm not going to get angry about this. Remember, would this really matter in the scope of life, 50 years from now, would this thing really matter, me laying here on the floor? You could get up and laugh with them. Oh boy, I tripped or something, you know. You can determine in your mind not to get out of control. It's hard to practice. But see the word practice, practicing the peaceful solution, it's hard to do this. I'm not kidding you. It's not easy. But you can do it. You can practice it. You really can. Just try it one time, you know. Next time something takes place and that trigger hits and you know that you can feel it coming, you're angry, try to do it differently. Just stop and you know, let your hands down and lower your head or something, you know, and cool down and think about the other person, having real consideration and care and concern for the other individual. How could you possibly have bad thoughts about the person? Think about it. If you want to really practice the peaceful solution, and so for those of you that are online out there right now, and those of you that are, you know, everyone here, I hope, is wanting to be a teacher of the peaceful solution, you've got to be aware, and I say this pretty much every time, but you've got to be aware that you are teaching right now. In everything that you do, in every action you take, if you're arguing with somebody, it's being taken note of by those of you that are around you. Don't think it's not. So, and here's a possible way to solve the situation in letter D. Is this a situation you could walk away from? And, you know, to ask for an explanation of the answer, yeah, you know, and one of the possible things is you could apologize for getting in their way and walk away. That's one way. That's pretty tough right there, you know. Remember, we already talked about that in being able to forgive and apologize and all. That's pretty tough, of apologizing for that, for getting in his or her way, you know. But if you can do it, do it. If you got to get up and laugh about it too and say, oh man, I must have tripped or something, you know, then do it. But don't get up fighting. Don't get up with rage. We're going to look at another one here, another one of the scenarios. Okay, so let's look at number 4 on page 80. Number 4, you're at school, work, whatever, you give the wrong answer when you're called on. Your classmate, coworkers, whatever, turns around and calls you stupid. Oh boy, what are you going to do now? In front of everybody. And as if that wasn't bad enough, he encourages his friends to call you stupid also. And even though you ask him to stop, he continues to tease you and call you names. Man, is that tough or what? So, stopping again and identifying the primary emotion, you know, if you're practicing, it'll come quickly and you'll be able to do it very fast, but if you're just getting started and not really used to it, you might have to sit there a minute with a blank look on your face while you're trying to figure this out. But identifying your primary emotion. Almost everybody, I think, would feel embarrassed and humiliated in that situation. Discouraged, frustrated. You know, there's many different things that could take place. These aren't the only things that could take place. And what consequences could result from handling the situation inappropriately? Well, just like before, it could result in, you know, be thinking of some ways right here. I'm talking, but you could be thinking of some ways in your own mind here on what some of the consequences could be if you did wrong here and jumped up and did something that you really shouldn't have done. You know, things like this has led to people getting killed. Things like this has led to fights, physical impairments, and you know, broken friendships, broken education, many different things, fired from jobs. So there's all kinds of consequences. So what cool thought could you help to resolve this conflict? All right, well, think about it a minute. You're there, he's turned around, called you stupid, and trying to get everyone else to call you stupid, and everybody's laughing, and you're the big dunce right there, you know, and you're feeling it, embarrassed and humiliated, what could you do? What cool thought could you possibly have to help solve this conflict? That is a tough one right there. What are you going to do? Get up and say, well, he's right, I guess I am stupid. Well, no, I don't think you're going to do that. But what would you do, really? Think about it. So, a cool thought could be, and here's an example, getting mad isn't going to help. He wants to make me angry, which you're already feeling some anger because the secondary emotion, you don't agree with what's going on, so you already got it there. But you don't have to have uncontrolled anger. Okay, I refuse to give in to him. I made a mistake, but I'll certainly keep aiming for my best. You could say something like that even. I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and I'll try to do better next time. Something like that. If you feel like you really need to say something. But determining in your mind of not giving in to that war. And not giving in to the rage is the thing to do. That's the thoughts that you could have. Now, is this something, letter D, that you would want to bring to the attention of your parents or guidance counselor? Well, yeah. Yeah, you would want to. Number one, you'd want to know if you dealt with it properly. Run it by them, see if you dealt with it properly. And number two, being it was rude for the person to do that, and it was very inappropriate, and it could have caused many different consequences like we talked about, and so you could talk about that too on, especially if it turns into a continuing thing where, the person looks at you again, the next class he looks at you and snarls, So, all right, we have time for another scenario, I believe. So, number 5, you're putting your supplies away in your locker, and suddenly the class bully slams the locker door against you. Now, you know what, guys, or everybody out there, this is real stuff. These are things that really do occur, every day in some kind of hallway at a school somewhere, whether it be middle school, elementary school, high school, whatever the case might be. And are y'all thinking about this? Have you ever seen these things take place in your school when you were going to school? Did you ever see it? Shake your head up or down, up or back and forth for no, or you can shake it back and forth for yes if you want to. But have you ever seen it take place? Yeah. So these are real deals right here. And what would you do, or what did you do? What would you do if this today? What would you do if the bully slams the locker door against you in the hallway and everybody's there? You're between classes for that little 3-minute deal you got to get to the next class, and you stop by your locker. What would you do? Well, what's the primary emotion? You got to think about it for a minute. What am I feeling? What am I feeling here? And so you think about it, and you could feel shocked, hurt, embarrassed, humiliated. We have something in common with all these scenarios we've talked about, is the embarrassed and humiliated. Or you might not be so shocked because it was the school bully, you might be shocked he did it to you. But what are you going to do at this point? This is what we have to be practicing. This is why we have to be practicing the peaceful solution in everything that we do, because when one of these shocking experiences comes about to where, it could be a supervisor, a teacher, or something like that does it to you, that has had a bad day and showing you some disrespect, what are you going to do to them? Are you going to retaliate? Are you going to take the hit? Are you going to take the punch? Are you going to take the hurt? You're putting your... So, anyway, the consequences could result in handling it inappropriately. Of course, there could be a fight. You could be suspended, fired from your job, or whatever, wherever this is taking place at. All these things is just like the other scenarios that we talked about. Could go to jail. Someone could die. Someone could get hurt really bad. What cool thoughts would you need to handle this situation? Well, just like the others, as long as you can keep your cool, and as long as you're determined not to let rage take hold, you can handle this deal. Count to 10, take a deep breath, do these things. Let your shoulders down, let your arms down a little bit. Kind of get out of that tensed up mode. Unclench your fists, All these things are things that you can do to help start cooling the situation down a little bit. Don't put more fuel on the fire. And, you know, hey, here it is right here. In this example, at the end, it says, I can handle this situation. This moment won't last forever. So in the scope of life, what is this? It's nothing. I can apologize for getting in his way. Now, is this one of the situations that you could possibly walk away from? Look at D on the top of page 81. Is this a situation you should walk away from? Okay, yes or no? Think of your answer. Well, yes, this is one you could walk away from. There's no reason to argue with the person. Two wrongs never make a right. This is one of the first statements, one of the first ones, not the first, but one of the first statements that the author of The Peaceful Solution has made at the front of The Peaceful Solution. In the first unit, he says that his dad always taught him that two wrongs don't make a right. So see, he was having a firm foundation of positive character being supplied in his life, so he had a great foundation to grow on and build himself on. Yeah, he had some negatives too that were in there in life, which we all do, but he had parents that cared and wanted to see him treat people properly. Another thing he said was always keep your word. You know, when it used to be done on a handshake when an agreement was made, and a man never broke his word. If he did, he was considered just sorry, you know. So, anyways, two wrongs never make a right. You could apologize, remove yourself from the situation, go to a safe place, and also report that this is taking place to those in authority, you know, teachers, principal, etc. And looking at the bottom of page 81, remember you're the only one that has control over your own behavior. Nobody else does. Remember the picture back on page 70 of the puppet on the string. You can give that control over to somebody. You can, if you're going to be in control, then you're practicing self-control, you're practicing the peaceful solution, and you're not letting somebody else run your life or because of the things they're doing influence you so much that you make the wrong choice and do the wrong thing. So you want to have control of your own life. You want to be the one with the strings, you know. Don't let it push your buttons. Remain humble and apologetic. And I remember one of the great teachers of the Peaceful Solution giving the example before of a battery, you know, and I'm not talking about myself. I have used that before, but I got it from him. But using the picture of a battery and saying that, you know, here's the negative post and here's the positive post. You have to have both for the battery to work. And so keep in mind when someone comes up and pushes your buttons, they're given that negative right there. And so for everything to work properly, you come back with the positive. But you do have to have that negative so you can tell if you're even using the peaceful solution. And to tell if you've changed, if your character has changed, you have to have those negatives come at you sometimes. And so he said, actually, you could look at that person as a friend because they're helping you find your weak points, right? That person that comes up and pushes your buttons and you're ready to kind of go off for a second, you know, and you start identifying what you're feeling and having cool thoughts. And one of those cool thoughts and one of those things to have in your mind is this influence, is that look at that person as a friend because they're helping you to find where you have some weakness that you can work on, okay? So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for being here this evening and coming to the Peaceful Solution Teacher Training course, the certification course. And really, you can try that one tonight too. You know, I like to leave a little something for you. Try that tonight. Think about that person being a friend. When someone comes up and pushes your buttons and you're like, why is he doing that again? Think of that person as a friend because he's letting you see that you haven't quite got past it yet to where you're automatically out of the chute thinking cool thoughts, okay? So remember that, and remember the next class is going to be on 5/4/2022, and that's on Wednesday evening at 5:30. And Chris should be the teacher, and so everyone should look forward to that. And we look forward to having you here again for another Peaceful Solution class. Thank you very much for being here.